Well, for better or worse, folks, it's game on. Democrats are officially fighting back. This is Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom of California signing legislation into law that will create a special election in California on November 4th, 2025, which will allow California voters to decide whether California will retaliate against Texas and other red states who are gerrymandering at the behest of Donald Trump to try to steal the 2026 election. The outcome is uncertain, but right now, Democrats are fighting back, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, this is a big step. Democrats have earned a reputation for being feckless over the years. Newsom is showing that the Democratic Party has teeth, even though it's quite risky. Newsom signs California redistricting measures in response to Texas bill. Newsom signed 2 redistricting bills into law on Thursday after the state's Democratic-controlled legislature passed them earlier in the day. The legislation is in direct response to Texas's Republican-controlled House passing a new congressional map at the urging of Donald Trump, and the consequences of both could prove pivotal in the 2026 midterms and 2028 presidential election. Newsom, at the bill's signing, declared a special election for November 4th for Californians to vote on newly drawn congressional districts. And we're going to play clips of Governor Newsom's speech at that signing ceremony. The other side, James Gallagher, the Republican leader in the California Assembly, said during the debate on the bills that redistricting moves, quote, were about power on both sides, rigging congressional districts to get partisan results, adding, quote, that's what a gerrymander is. Gallagher says he agrees with a lot of Trump's agenda, but he believes that his redistricting calls are wrong and took issue with Newsom's fight fire with fire comments on the matter. Quote, you move forward with fighting fire with fire, and what happens? You burn it all down. In this case, it affects our most fundamental American principle, representation. Now, that's true. That's why the fighting fire with fire metaphor, I suppose, is ultimately illogical. But the idea isn't to simply roll over and allow yourself to be immolated. And I think that's what this Republican is struggling to understand. At the end of the day, his party started this. Our party, the Democratic Party, begged them to stop. They will not see reason. And so Democrats not only have the right, but they have the obligation to engage in what I call political self-defense by retaliatory gerrymandering. So let's play some clips from Governor Newsom at the signing of this legislation.
First, just briefly back up and pick up a little bit on what the Speaker and the Pro Tem said, and just remind everybody what they reminded you that need to be reminded, all of us again, of how we got here. We got here because the President of the United States is struggling. We got here because the President of the United States is one of the most unpopular presidents in U.S. history. We got here because he recognizes that he will lose the election. Congress will go back into the hands of the Democratic Party next November. We got here because of his failed policies. Those are being exposed hour by hour, reinforced today by Walmart announcing they'll be raising prices because of the tax increases, because of the tariffs. Reminded every day by a slowing economy, growing mistrust, distrust all across this nation, across the board. He is failing. He recognized that, and that's why he made a phone call to Greg Abbott asking for 5 seats. Can't win by playing by traditional sets of rules. He plays by no rules. I remind you all the time, it's not the rule of law, it's the rule of Don.
Agreed. And under that gangster mentality, given that we're obligated to play the game of politics, it's not like Monopoly, where you can just say, okay, screw it, I'm just not going to play with you. We have to play the game. Politics is one game that you literally can't stop playing. By definition, the Democratic Party and liberals and progressives have to have a seat at the table because they have to help try to shape the trajectory of this country. It would be like Democrats saying, hey, we're going to change the rules, and Republicans, if you don't like it, just get out of politics. Republicans would rightly be like, no, that's insane. We have an obligation to stay in politics. So whereas in typical game metaphors, we would just stop playing with the cheating party. We have no choice but to continue to play with the cheating party, which means we, again, have the right and the obligation to respond in kind. Here's Governor Newsom in another clip.
They fired the first shot, Texas. We wouldn't be here had Texas not done what they just did. Donald Trump didn't do what he just did. He went so far as to follow up and say that he didn't just want those 5 seats. He said he's, quote unquote, entitled to those 5 seats. Just pause and reflect on that. Everything should have just stopped there. President of the United States claiming he's entitled to 5 seats. That should put chills up your spine. Every Republican, not just Democrat and Independent, every American. Those enduring values that we celebrate, just celebrated 200 49 years, the best of the Roman Republic, Greek democracy, the rule of law, co-equal branches of government, popular sovereignty. What we'll celebrate, will we? Next year, the 250th anniversary. That.
It's a great point. Donald Trump is wildly un-American, unpatriotic in the sense that he's anti-democratic, and he has a sense of entitlement. Imagine how Democrats would have responded if President Biden or President Obama or President Clinton, during the lead up to midterm elections during their terms, if they called Democratic lawmakers and said, "Hey, listen, we want you to rework the maps because I, the president, am entitled to not only congressional, these specific seats, I suppose, but congressional control. Period. I'm entitled to it. I have a right to it. Not that that I have the right to try to fight for it, politically speaking, campaign for it." But I'm entitled to simply have it. There shouldn't even. I mean, elections are almost superfluous, right? We just no, it's mine. Gimme. It's mine. Gimme. Imagine how Republicans would have responded if a Democratic president said something so profanely authoritarian. They'd lose their minds, and rightly so. But we don't see that in the Democratic Party. We only see it in the Republican Party.
Masked men at the site of the Japanese were interned and bussed in Little Tokyo last week in Los Angeles were sent right there in front of the Democracy Center as we kicked off this effort. That's a preview of things to come all across the United States of America. Mark my word, just as we let folks know what was going to happen in other cities, what is happening in Washington, D.C., we said 2 months ago, Los Angeles is a preview of things to come with the federalization of the National Guard, with the militarization of the streets of America. And I'll remind you, Donald Trump never sent the military, active duty military, in his first term or now even his second term, anywhere overseas. He sent them to a United States city. They remain federalized National Guard, interestingly, through Election Day.
That is very ominous, and a good observation by Governor Newsom, which should scare the hell out of all of us, that this is nearly dress rehearsal. And I should say that Steve Bannon, one of Donald Trump's top advisors, one of the biggest influencers in the MAGA world, has called for that, saying that Trump should deploy the National Guard to polling places, not just in Washington, D.C., but elsewhere as well across the country. So this does seem like an authoritarian dress rehearsal. It's very, very ominous. I should also remind you that Trump did not deploy the D.C. National Guard when his violent insurrectionists attempted to overthrow the government, and he watched it unfold for 3 hours. So again, the hypocrisy and the total lack of democratic principles are on full display. Here's another clip.
Day. $175 billion in the bill that was just signed to reinforce the ranks of ICE, Homeland Security, for what is increasingly becoming self-evident to anyone with eyes wide open and any level of objectivity, a private army for Donald Trump, owing an oath only to him, not the Constitution of the United States. You just heard from the Speaker that vote-in-mail ballots are being threatened by the President of the United States. 80% of Californians, no coincidence, 80% submitted their ballots in the last election, 86% in 2022, 88% in 2020. He's trying to rig the election. He's trying to set up the conditions where he can claim that the elections were not won fair and square. Open your eyes to what is going on in the United States of America in 2025.
Again, really, really powerful words. We have no reason to give Trump the benefit of the doubt. Every reason not to. Every reason not to. So yes, this is good. Governor Newsom is fighting back. Again, ultimately, the voters will decide this. Ultimately, it's not that Newsom has passed these maps, signed these maps into law. He simply passed into law the conditions allowing this to go to a vote in which Californian voters will get to decide. Now, all they need is a simple majority. Seems likely that they'll get it, but it's not certain. It's not certain. The Independent Redistricting Committee, which will be temporarily, I don't want to say suspended, but they will. The maps that they design will be temporarily ignored until 2030. That commission is very popular. because California generally doesn't want gerrymandered maps. Newsom is banking on the idea that if I make the case that this is temporary and it's only in political self-defense, only in retaliation against what Republicans are doing to try to effectively cut California and other blue states out of power permanently, and California voters will be like, oh, okay, well then in this case, yeah, we have every right to swing back. So we'll see what happens. I will also just want to point this out, though, as I'm giving Newsom his flowers, and by the way, so should you. Newsom, I think, is a mixed record when it comes to policy. He's got some good policy. Sounds like he's got some bad policy as well. I don't live in California, but the bottom line, set policy aside for a moment. We're not in power at the federal level. What we have been seeking, what most of you have been seeking, whether you're a liberal or progressive, whether you're a liberal or a democratic socialist, or wherever you fall in the anti-Trump pro-democracy coalition, you've been asking for Democrats to be fighters. Newsom is objectively stepping up, which means, in my opinion, you have an obligation to praise Newsom. That doesn't mean you have to co-sign everything he does. That doesn't mean that you can't hold him accountable if he stops fighting or if he takes a turn for the worse. But he's fighting now, and you should publicly praise him. Moreover, we need to incentivize other Democratic leaders like Kathy Hochul in New York, Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, and others to step up because, as you Mish voter points out, the redistricting wars will likely end with 8 more Republican seats. Texas, Florida, Ohio, Indiana, and Missouri. Texas is already moving. The other 4 states that I just mentioned are signaling that they might proceed to try to help pad Trump's margins. And right now, California is the only one who's really stepped up. It can't just be California, folks. It's good that California is fighting back, but California has to be joined by blue states. And by the way, Democratic lawmakers and Democratic governors, we all need to be thinking about this in the future because California and New York have to overcome certain hurdles that they've imposed on themselves in an act of unilateral disarmament. So note to Democratic lawmakers out there, maybe we don't unilaterally disarm ever until we force a federal nationwide disarmament with respect to gerrymandering. Maybe we should think about that because it looks like democratic largesse, democratic democracy principles are being abused by mad faith authoritarians like Trump and the Republican Party, which makes our jobs a hell of a lot harder. So kudos to Newsom, kudos to California Democrats. Hopefully they vote the correct way on November 4th. I will try to make that happen by raising awareness about this. I might go out to California, might collaborate with other content creators like Brian Tyler Cohen, Luke Beasley, and Adam Mockler to raise awareness of this. Obviously, if you like, subscribe, and share the videos as well, and not only praise Newsom, but give a call to action for other Democratic governors and other Democratic lawmakers to step up and meet the moment. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.